Mike Stagg is fresh off of vacation. He is ready to rock the world and talk to us about cutoff saw safety. Mike, what do you got to tell us today?
Yeah, we're gonna talk cutoff saw safety today. Like Jason said, I'm fresh back from vacation, ready to roll, and this is a topic that is super important. Um, these cutoff saws, demo saws, whatever you want to call them, they're the backbone of a lot of our public works, a lot of our fire uh, operations. Okay, they are workhorses for us. We do a lot of stuff with these demo and cutoff saws. But dang it, these demo and cutoff saws, they are dangerous. And I'm sure you guys all know that they're dangerous, and we all know they're dangerous. Okay, let's do a little bit of math here. Big power plus big blades equals big risk. That's really what we're after here. These saws are huge issues. They're very dangerous. A few years ago here at the Trust, within the span of just a few weeks, we had two very serious injuries happen with these demo saws. Now, neither of these resulted in a fatality, but a millimeter off one way or the other, one could have sliced through somebody's femoral artery, the other one could have sliced through somebody's carotid artery. Could have had two fatalities within the span of a few weeks because of accidents with demo saws. These are extremely dangerous pieces of machinery. Okay, these folks now they're back to work. They're doing great, but this is something that's going to live for them for the rest of their life. We don't want it to happen to you. We don't want it to happen to anybody. Okay, we want to make sure we do these things right when we're using these pieces of equipment. We do it right every single time. These are very dangerous pieces of machinery. We have to treat them with the utmost respect. Okay. That's why it's important. We're going to talk really a four-step process here to make sure we do it right and we keep it safe every single time. Okay. We have to know the tool. We've got to know what we're dealing with. We got to know the beast. Okay. We got to know how to use the beast, know how to use that demo saw, how to use it safely. We have to know its hazards. What are the hazards? What are things that could get us in trouble? And how do we avoid those hazards? And lastly, we've got to know the proper PPE to wear. Okay. We're going to talk about each of these four things separately today and how these four play into keeping us safe when we're using this piece of machinery. First off, we got to know the tool. Okay. As we talk knowing the tool, again, another four-step process. The blades. Got to know the difference between different blades that can be installed on these saws because that's important. That helps drive some of the safety requirements that we're going to talk about. How we safely start the saw, how we safely transport and move the saw. And then lastly, how to actually use that saw and do it safely. All goes into knowing the tool. Let's talk about blades first. Okay. The first blade is probably the one that we use the most. It's probably our most common. It's the diamond blade. Okay. Now, all the blades, they're going to say on them, going to have plastered right on the front of them what kind of a blade they are, what they're rated for, what kind of media they cut through. All that kind of stuff is going to be listed on the blade itself. With the diamond blade, they have teeth. They can be aggressive. They can be not very aggressive. Okay. But these diamond blades, what they're used to cut asphalt, used to cut concrete, stone, clay brick, and pipe. Okay. So these diamond blades, that's the kind of media that they're used for. Those are the only type of media that they're used for. Okay. Now, also with the diamond blades, again, they are made precisely for their intended use. Don't use a diamond blade on a piece of media that it shouldn't be used on. Okay. They are rated and used for your saw specific RPMs. So make sure that you match the RPM of your saw with the RPM of the blade. Don't use a blade rated for a certain RPM on a saw that goes to greater RPMs than what that blade's rated for. What can happen? That blade can break apart on you. Okay. So we got to make sure that we are using the blade precisely for its intended method within the specified RPMs of the machine. Okay. Now with these diamond blades, there is a couple of different kind of orientation with the teeth. More teeth on them is going to equal a smoother operation of that blade. Okay, more cutting materials. Less teeth is going to be something that's a little bit more aggressive for you. So maybe for your, you're cutting your asphalt, cutting concrete, you got to get down there. Maybe you want less teeth, a little bit more aggressive. You get down there to the pipe though, maybe you want something with a smoother operation. You want more teeth on there. Okay, so you can make a better and smoother cut. What's important to note with the diamond blade is that water is always required when you use a diamond blade. All right. Water is always required when using a diamond blade. No exceptions. You've got to use water. These blades, they build an intense amount of heat. They need to be cooled down. Okay. So we got to make sure that we use water with a diamond blade. Your other blade that you can use is what we call an abrasive blade. Okay. Now, an abrasive blade doesn't have teeth. It's an abrasive piece of material. Okay. Now we can use these as well for asphalt and concrete and stone, much like we could use that diamond blade for. But these blades are specifically for ductile cast iron and steel. So if you've got ductile cast iron, maybe old pipe that you're using to cut, this is what you'd use. You'd use that abrasive blade. You wouldn't use that diamond blade necessarily. This is where that abrasive blade comes into play. Cutting steel, you could use an abrasive blade. All right. Now, with abrasive blades, they are also made precisely for their intended use and made only for the saw's RPMs. Again, no difference there between that abrasive blade and the diamond blade. Always only for their intended use and rated for the specific RPMs of the machine. Make sure that that blade is within the range of the RPM of your saw. If your saw revs to a higher RPM, then that blade can handle. Don't use that blade on that saw. Okay, very simple. These abrasive blades, they are used for cutting only. Okay, Jason, we're going to talk in a few weeks about grinder safety. We won't mention demo saws in the grinder safety webinar because they are not grinders. Okay, make sure that they are not used as a grinding wheel. They are only used for cutting. Okay, make sure there's no pressure put on the side of these blades. If you get pressure on the side of an abrasive blade, what it's going to do is it's going to bust apart on you. Okay, make sure that there's no pressure being pushed or put on the side of that blade. All right, with the abrasive blades, there's a couple of different types of abrasive blades. Okay, you have a blade that's made out of aluminum oxide, and those blades we use for metal. Then you have the silicon carbide blades, and those are used for concrete. So you've got to think about this. If I've got a concrete roadway that I've got to cut and I'm going to use an abrasive blade, I got to make sure it's silicon carbide as I'm making that cut. Then if I get down there and I have ductile cast iron work that I've got to cut through, I've got to switch my blade out from the silicon carbide blade to the aluminum oxide abrasive blade in order to safely cut that piece of metal. Okay? Make sure that you're only using the saw for its intended use on its intended media with the right type of material. All the saws, they are going to say, or all the blades, excuse me, are going to say right on them exactly what they can and cannot be used for. Make sure that we're using it for the right type of media. Now, with these blades, with these abrasive blades, they can be used in a wet or a dry application. These don't always require water. Again, read the label. Manufacturer's recommendations are not just recommendations, they're requirements. Okay? Make sure you follow all the manufacturer's requirements when you install one of these abrasive or diamond blades on and you're using it for its intended purpose. Now, each time before you start the saw, you've got to inspect the blade before its use. Now, does that mean if I use the blade, then I set the blade, or I stop the blade and set the machine down, I go and do something else, I come back and I'm going to restart it, then I got to inspect the blade again? Yes, it does. Every time before you start the saw, you've got to inspect the blade. If you find anything wrong with that blade, swap it out. Get a new blade in there. It's not worth it. If there's cracks or missing teeth, get rid of that blade. Don't use a dull blade. Don't use a blade that's worn. Okay, missing or irregular or worn or cutting edge on an abrasive blade is very hazardous. Don't want to use that kind of blade. Look for warped or an unevenly worn blade, something that isn't worn correctly. Swap that blade out. A sharp saw is a safe saw. A dull saw is not a safe one. And make sure that it's sharp and there's no cracks, missing teeth, or any kind of warping or irregular worn patterns in that blade. If there are, swap that blade out. Okay. Before starting the saw, also, we have to perform a visual inspection of the entire saw. So we're going to inspect the blade very thoroughly, but we're also going to inspect the saw itself. Make sure we have a blade guard and it's in place. Okay. The blade guard is not optional, guys. I know some of us move it out of the way because we can't see what we're doing. Blade guard has to be there, has to be installed. If you don't have an installed blade guard, you shouldn't use the blade. That's simple. Okay. Adjust the guard for whatever cutting angle you're going to have. Make sure you stay 10 feet away from any kind of fueling source. So if you bring gas cans out there that you fill up the saw with, make sure those gas cans get at least 10 feet away from the point of operation of that saw. Make sure when you're fueling up that you use the proper gas oil mix. Okay. Again, read the manufacturer's recommendations and requirements and make sure that you follow those to mix your gas and oil correctly so the saw functions correctly. And always make sure you have a nearby fire extinguisher. I know many of us have those fire extinguishers on our trucks. This is a great time to get down that fire extinguisher and put it right by where you're going to be working, just to make sure that if something goes haywire, that you've got a fire extinguisher there. Now we're going to check a lot of things in this visual inspection. Okay, we're checking that blade guard. We're going to check the rip and pull cord, make sure that it's in good shape. We're going to check all the bolts and the screws and make sure that everything's tight and secure for us when we're going to use that saw. We're going to check the hoses, make sure there's not any leaks, oil leaks, gas leaks, things like that. The gas fuel cap fits tightly. The blade is in there tight. We're going to check everything on this piece of machinery to make sure that it's safe and ready to go. Again, this needs to be done every single time before you use the saw. So if the saw's been off and you're gonna turn it and you're gonna rev it back on, dang it, you need to check it again. Okay, you need to do your visual inspection again. Now, when we talk about starting a demo saw, we're never ever gonna drop start the saw. What's a drop start? Okay, drop start, you hold it in your hand and you rip the rip cord out. Okay, that's a drop start. Or you pull on the rip cord and you let the saw drop. That's a drop start. Okay, so if we're holding the saw in one hand and rip it and pulling the rip cord with the other, with it held off the ground, that's a drop start. We don't want to do that. Okay, these saws generate significant power. Because they generate significant power, they also generate significant torque. Okay, torque is what is going to cause the blade to move and to walk on your pieces of material. Okay. The weight of the saw is going to cause that blade to drift downwards. Because the saw, the way it's weighted, the way the fulcrum is where you grab on that grab handle on top, it's going to cause that blade to go down because of the way that saw is built. Okay? What this means is when you start a cut or when you put that saw into material, it's going to want to violently move anything that's lighter weight. Okay? Because if it pulls it, if it's generating that torque, it's going to want to violently move that out of the way. Okay, so it's important when we start the saw that we never drop start it. We never hold it in one hand and rip the rip cord in the other. Okay, we always start with the saw on the ground. Okay, place the saw on the ground. Place one foot on the hand guard or through the handle. Put some weight down. Make sure that is secured down to the ground. Make sure the area around you is clear and you're on good footing. Okay. Then you're going to hold the saw firmly. You're going to put your right hand on the rear handle and your left hand on the top stabilizer bar. Okay. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take that right hand and you can rip the cord with the right hand to start that up while placing the pressure down with your foot on that bar and holding tightly on that rail in what we call a power grip. Okay. Now, what is a power grip? You might ask. Here's what a power grip is. A power grip is an underhand grip. Okay. It's an underhand grip, 4 fingers laced all the way around that bar with your thumb locked across the top. That's what we call a power grip. Okay. Don't go overhand. Overhand, it's easy to slip out of your hand. Underhand power grip with the bar right in your palm of your hand. Okay. Make sure that all 4 fingers wrap tightly around that bar and your thumb goes over the top. Hold that thing tight. Don't let the saw control you. You control the saw. Okay? You're the master of the beast. Don't let the beast master you. Now, when we're using the saw and that saw is ready to go, always make sure we work clear of obstacles. Okay, make sure everything's cleared out, make sure there's nothing in the way that it's going to get caught by the saw, caught by the material that is being cut. Never ever work alone when working with a demo saw. This is not a lone wolf job. Okay, you can't just take the demo saw and say, all right, I'm going to go start cutting. You guys come out when you're ready. We make sure that you're there with at least one other people, if not 2, 3, or 4 other people. Okay, this is for safety, making sure that if something does happen, you got people there to help you. This is also to make sure that we're doing it right every single time. Okay, we got that other person there to help us. Hey, did you remember to do this? Did you remember to check the blade? Check. Let's both take a look. Make sure that we both feel comfortable with how this blade looks. Make sure you're not drop starting the saw. Make sure we're doing it right every single time. Okay, make sure that there's a stocked first aid kit in case something happens and people know where that first aid kit is and how to use it to help stop bleeding. Tourniquets. Anytime you're using a demo saw, you should have a tourniquet inside that first aid kit. Because if something gets sliced, it's slicing, and that blade is slicing hot and fast. Having a tourniquet on hand is going to be critical in case something happens. Okay? Now, watch for the hazards when using the saw. There are hazards that come up as you're using that saw. First and foremost is exhaust fumes. Okay? You're putting up the carbon monoxide from the gasoline, from the engine running. Now, if you're down in the confined space, you might need to do some air monitoring because you're displacing the oxygen there and replacing it with carbon monoxide. And if you're displacing the oxygen and the oxygen content falls below what we need it to stay inside of a confined space, we're going to need respiratory protection. So never use one of these demo saws inside a confined space without respiratory protection in place. We need to have that done and in place before we start up that saw inside that confined space. Okay. Always make sure we chalk round pipes. Why do you want to chalk a round pipe? Yeah, because you want to make sure that that material doesn't move on you when you're making the cut. Or after you've made the cut, that it doesn't start to roll away on you. Support the cutting object so that the cut remains open. Every time you make a cut with a demo saw, you want to make sure that that cut is supported. So that the material, after you've made the cut at the end, it doesn't fold in on itself and pinch that blade. Okay? We have to make sure that that cutting object is supported. Now, this is a good representation of that. You can see here on the left, we've got that, where we've got that cut in, that cuts right in the middle where our supports are on the edges. If our supports are on the edges and we make the cut in the middle, what's going to happen when that cut breaks through? Yeah, that material is going to fold in on your blade, right? We want to make sure that we're supporting that cut and we're making the cut outside of where that support is. So we've supported here, like you see on the right-hand side, and we make the cut outside of the support so the spoil falls off on the end and doesn't cause the rest of the material to collapse in on itself and pinch your blade. Okay? Very important here when using the saw is to never stand in line with your cutting wheel. Never stand in line with that cutting wheel. Always stand out to the side. So don't have the saw right in front of your body when you're making the cut. Pull that saw out to the side as you make that cut. This assures if there is a kickback of the saw, it's not kicking back into you, into your face, and that saw is not coming back at you at full rev. That it instead kicks back up and away from your body. Do not bend over your cutting wheel. Don't bend down and look down at what you're doing over the cutting wheel because, again, if you get kickback, it's coming right back at your head. Do not ever work with a demo saw above shoulder height. If you have to reach up over your shoulders, you can't use a demo saw. It's too high for you. Okay, you need to make another plan to make sure you can take care of that. Never operate the demo saw with only one hand. It's a two-hand operated tool. Make sure you do it that way every single time. Never ever push down on the saw. Let the blade do the work. Okay? Don't push down on the saw. If you're having a hard time getting through the material where you're having to put a lot of pressure down on that saw, either number one, that blade's not sharp enough, or number two, you're using the wrong blade. Or number three, you shouldn't be using a demo saw on that piece of material. Okay? Don't push down on the saw. Let the saw do the work. Now, when you transport the saw and you set that saw down, you never ever set down a demo saw or transport a demo saw until the engine's off and the blade has stopped running. Then can it go up? Then can you set it down on the ground? Only then are you able to set it down on the ground and let go, is when the engine is off and the blade has stopped moving. Okay, that's the only times that we set that blade down. Now, when we're gonna make our cuts, all right. First off, we got to decide the cutting direction. Where are we gonna go at it? Then we're gonna grind a groove. We're gonna grind a groove with a grinder, not your saw. Don't use your saw to grind that groove. Okay, grind that groove with a different piece of machinery. Then you're gonna find that groove and you're gonna pull your cutting wheel into the work. Pull the cutting wheel into the workpiece. Don't push or make a plunge cut with a demo saw. Never do that. That's how you get a blade bind, and that's how you get a kickback. Okay? Don't ever push or plunge a demo saw. It's always a pull cut. You want to make sure you leave small hinges that will hold the cut part open. Okay? You always want to make sure that you leave the cut open when you're making that cut. Don't ever cut all the way through with a demo saw, because if we do, it has a propensity to break and bind the blade. Only break the hinges after all the cuts have been made. Once all the cuts have been made, use a different piece of material or machinery to cut the last hinge off to break that cut apart. All right. Let's talk about kickback. We've talked about kickback just a minute. You've heard me talk about it. Let's talk about it here in a little bit more depth. Kickback happens when the saw is suddenly thrown up and back in an uncontrolled arc. It's coming back up at you. Okay? Kickback can occur when the cutting wheel becomes jammed above the upper quarter of the blade. So when we're using a demo saw, the only part of the blade that we should use is the lower corner. The bottom quarter of that blade is the only part of that blade that we should be using to cut. If we're using the top quarter of that blade, the upper quarter, we're gonna get kickback. That's just the way it's gonna work. Because the way the blade moves and the amount of torque that's generated by that blade, we're gonna get kickback if we use the upper quarter. The lower quarter is the only part of the blade that we should be using. Okay? Or kickback is gonna happen if the blade is severely braked. If we get some material coming down on the sides of it and stopping that blade from moving, it's gonna rev and kick back right up at you. Okay? So in order to reduce kickback, we got to work cautiously and methodically. Got to take our time when we're using a demo saw. Always make sure we're holding on tight and firm with the power grip on both our handle and the grab handle. Okay? Never use the upper quarter part of the cutting wheel. Again, only the bottom quarter of the cutting wheel is the only place we should be making the cut. Always introduce the cut without pushing or twisting. Okay? Introduce it into a nice smooth pull cut. Okay? Don't twist or push into that cut. Now, personal protective equipment. Let's talk about that. Personal protective equipment, close fitting clothes so nothing gets caught inside of the blade. Chaps are very, very highly recommended. Make sure you tie back your long hair. Safety shoes with steel caps or a composite toe box, 100% required. Safety glasses or goggles, 100% required. Hearing protection, 100% required. Heavy duty leather gloves, 100% required. Okay? We got to make sure we're kitted out correctly in our PPE to use one of these pieces of machinery. Safety glasses, safety shoes with steel or composite toe caps, hearing protection, heavy duty leather gloves, head protection in the form of a hard hat. All of those things need to be in place when we're using a demo saw. Think about other things like a respirator and a face shield that we might need if we're in a confined space. We'll need the respirator. We need to have respiratory protection. Okay? PPE is essential. It's also essential to know that there are alternatives to these demo saws. Demo saws are very, very dangerous. Okay? There are alternatives and things we might want to look into in place of the demo saw. Things like a pipe cutting machine, a pneumatic ductile iron chainsaw, okay? Or a manual portable hacksaw. There are tools that are much better for our use than one of these demo saws. They're much safer. They could be easier to use, okay? Look into that. Look into some alternatives. Now, just to close out, I've got some rules for you. And I put them in big type so you know that they're important. Okay. Rule number 1, inspect the blade before each use. Inspect that blade. If it's not up to snuff, get it out of there and get a new blade. Rule number 2, never drop start the saw. Always start the saw on the ground. Hands in the power grip, foot through the handguard or the handle, and pull the ripcord then with placing the pressure on the saw. You control the saw. Don't let the saw control you. Okay. Next rule, do not use the upper quarter of the cutting wheel. The only part of the cutting wheel we're going to use is the bottom corner, the bottom quadrant of that blade. That's the only place that we should be making cuts, is on the bottom quarter of that blade. You get into the upper quarter, you're going to get that kickback. Don't ever stand in line with your saw, is our next rule. Don't ever stand in line with that saw. Okay. Make sure that saw that you're making that cut on with is always to the side of you. You never are directly behind or over your saw. And our last rule, wear your PPE. PPE is required. Hard hat, goggles, safety glasses, hearing protection, leather gloves, foot protection. Everything is required with your PPE. You're fully kitted out when you're using one of these big demo saws. Make sure you do it right every single time. They're dangerous. We have to be sure that we're doing it right every single time. Know the saw, know the material you're cutting. Make sure you follow the recommendations on that blade and you use the correct blade for the correct type of material you're going to be cutting. Remember, to avoid the kickback, we need to make sure you're using the bottom quarter of the blade. I've said that many times, but it's extremely important. Don't ever use that upper quadrant. That's where you're going to get your kickback. Your PPE is required. Okay. That's all we got for you today. Jason, what do we
Mike,
think? Any questions?
important stuff. Folks, if you've got any questions, please type those into the chat box right now, and we'll get Mike to answer those while we still got him on the horn. Important stuff. These saws can be extremely hazardous if we don't use them in the right way. Please make sure you're using these important rules that Mike has explained today. Just looking, I see no questions. I think you covered it all amazingly well. Let's just make that commitment to do it right every time.
Yep. Do it right every time. Keep us safe.
That's it.
That's it.
All right. Thanks, folks. Appreciate you being here. And please go out and have a safe day. We'll see you again. We'll see you back here in 30 minutes if you're into ethics. If you want to figure out how to make some ethical decisions, we'll see how Jason does on that one. If you haven't signed up for it, go to utahtrust.gov, click on training and events, and we'll see you in a half hour. Thanks, folks. Be safe out there.
Thanks, everyone.